It's that time of the week again. Time for the Dad Next Door show, streaming live to you, 9 o'clock Thursday evenings. I'm Jason, aka the Dad Next Door, sometimes known as Daddy's Fast Cash or the owner of Dad's Pads. But enough about that. So tonight, we almost had a little bit of a tragedy. Emergencies happen. And thank goodness I had a Marine buddy dad that was available to do this interview. And I'm so glad because maybe he'll be a better guest. I think so. But you'll find out for yourself. We'll see. We'll get to hear from my man, Ben Killoy, in about a short 30-second reset. But for right now, I'm going to introduce you to my family like I do every week. So get ready. Get set. Let's go. Be right back.
Fatherhood. It's how we keep our tribes and families strong. You've landed in the right place if you're ready for dad jokes, tips, and tricks on fun parenting. Also with interviews with some of the coolest dad entrepreneurs we could track down and have them share their strategies to tackling it all in business and life on the Dad Next Door. And now, your host, Mr. Dad Jokes himself, Jason Centeno.
Say hi, Nana.
You ain't shy.
They don't show you it in action because things like this.
Oh, fix it. Fix it.
I love Daddy. He's a superhero. I don't know what a superhero. I know.
I always love that part. I don't know about you, but little kids singing always get me. What do you think about that, Ben?
I absolutely love it. And those moments where you see the kids singing, or often what I find when I get reflected or when I watch a video that I recorded, is I just get to remember that while in the chaos of fatherhood, there still are these memories that can anchor us that we often forget in the chaos of fatherhood. But our kids were just virtual for the last 2 months between Thanksgiving and 2 weeks after New Year's. And it was absolute chaos every day. I felt like I was living in a pressure cooker, and it was like Groundhog's Day every day. And like an hour into the first day they were back in school, and I was like, I miss these kids already. I'm like, are you an idiot? Are you drunk? Like, it was crazy. Why would you want to go back to that? And my iPhone reminded me of this memory, and it put all these pictures together that I had from the time when I was home with them. And we did a couple different activities like sledding and different things up here in Wisconsin. And I was like, I get caught up in that emotions are permanent, but really emotions are temporary, but the memories are permanent. And videos like that always remind me of that.
Yeah, man, it's a beautiful thing. I didn't even remember half of those when the guy was asking me, like, hey, I need to put something together. I was just like, all right, what do I got on my phone? So I just whipped out a bunch of things. I don't even remember when I took that video, but it came in handy. And I, thank goodness I didn't edit it because I probably wouldn't even thought of that one. But beautiful things happen when you let other people do what they're supposed to do. So
yeah, it's almost when you get it outside of yourself, someone else can see the beauty in it, and you don't get it connected with all your own internal BS that you can often think about it.
Exactly that. So I want to know, when did you become a dadpreneur? And I'm going to say, I believe you told me COVID was what set it off. So why don't we go into like how that happened for you?
Well, actually, last week is when it was my 1-year anniversary. So last year, January 27th of 2020, I went into work on a Monday morning, and it was a normal day like any other day at the office. And by 9 a.m., I had found out my position at work was going to be eliminated. And I had some soul searching to do because there were a few other positions that were open, but they really didn't fit me. And I was like, I've got to choose to try to reboot and leave or figure out what I'm going to do. And so I chose to leave and end an 8-year career at this company. And Valentine's Day was my last day as a W-2. And I've had this itch to be an entrepreneur. I was doing different things. I was blogging, I was podcasting, and I was like, okay, well, this must be the universe pulling the rug out on me and telling me like, okay, it's time to put the rubber to the road. And I was like, okay, I think I got this. And so I've committed to be a professional speaker. That's something that I've really been passionate about and got all excited about it. And then COVID hit. And so then that really shifted the whole game of what I was trying to do, because professional speaking was one of the first things that canceled. And I was like, well, that's not impossible, but it's definitely highly unlikely from the underdog point of view. So I backburnered that, really leaned into being a stay-at-home dad and helping support my wife, who's a kindergarten teacher, and trying to just keep kind of life flowing in some normalcy as much as I could. I kept the idea alive. I kept what I was doing. I kept my podcast alive. And I was in this, what I called networking mode. I just kept going from conversation to conversation. And each conversation would give me a little bit more insight. And eventually one of the two conversations kind of just really blew it open, where I got some opportunities to step into some podcast consulting and podcast editing this past summer. And then that stepped into, that's now primarily where I'm making my money. And I'm able to stay home with my daughter in the morning, who's in preschool. She goes to preschool in the afternoon. I'm able to get my work done in the afternoon. And I'm still running my podcast, still working on these bigger goals. And this whole year has kind of re-unfolded and reinvented myself as a dadpreneur, stay-at-home dad that lives in the world where it's dinners on me, cleaning the house is on me, making sure the laundry is being switched, making sure the sheets get washed, making sure the house is clean, all while also running an entrepreneur business. So like, it's been this compounded factor of trying to figure it out. And some days are hard, some days are fun, some days are interesting. You try to figure it out. And then other days I'm like, man, this day just felt like I was on fire from the moment I woke up. I got the gym, I got the kids on the bus, got my stuff done. I had fun with the kids. I got the laundry done. Dinner was ready. And those days happen. But then there's other days where it's chaotic. So it's a stay-at-home dadpreneur where I'm leaning in to try to create an anchor business essentially in my life that allows me to support my family and be present in the years of my kids' life that most people desire to have back when they're older. My kids are 8, 6, and 4. And whatever happens in my life going forward, 2020 will have been one of the best years of my life because I got to be home with my kids every day. I got to make memories. We did adventure days. All of that has just reignited more of who I am and brought a better version of myself to the surface. So everything has been growing in pain, but then also in a way that allows me to show up as a stronger person in general.
So you kind of touched on this when what you were just talking about, but I guess tell me what your daily routine looks like from like what time you get up. Because I mean, all entrepreneurs that I know, I mean, you got the 5 a.m. club, you got like people, you know, you have to shift things around though all the time with kids because one might be sick, there might be an errand, an appointment, da-da-da. So I guess just take it through a basic framework of when are your hours of work, you know, small chunks of time, just because I'm pretty sure people out there are like, well, what does that look like for me on a daily basis, right? So real quick, just run down like what time you get up to what time you go down and like, you know, when you generally get things done.
So I have a couple different routines and sometimes they each kind of hit the road at different times and they all have their own different purpose. My goal is always to try to be in bed by 10 to get all my work shut down if I can, even by 9:30. And if I can do that, then I can consistently wake up in the morning by 5. I can get to the gym. My wife's also getting ready at that time. By the time I'm getting home, we're kind of switching roles, and usually the kids have been sleeping still up to this point. So she's got her stuff. This house is a little quiet. I'll go do my shower, and then she's already out the door. And then I get out of the shower, and it's time to get the kids ready, get breakfast done. And the kids get on the bus at 8:15. So at 8:15 is essentially leading up to that moment where the 2 older kids are getting on the bus, and I still have my younger one with me. The younger one is pretty independent. She's she's almost like a Matilda type person. And she's just really smart to figure things out, really good at playing with herself out with different Barbies and different stuff and toys. So she's been a really good kid to help me do some stuff in the morning. The morning is kind of a mix. Sometimes I'll be folding laundry because I need to get these 2 loads folded. Sometimes it'll be like I have a meeting or a coaching call in the morning. Like I have that window open for meetings if it happens. If it doesn't, then I either fill it with something I need to get done, or I usually where I've really learned I need to err on the housework, because if I delay the housework to the end of the day, then I just get this overabundant stress. And next thing I know, it's like 3:00 and I'm like, crap, the world's going to be chaos because in an hour the kids are coming home and then everything's going to falling apart. So I've really learned to get my housework done in the morning by like 9:00. And if I can do that, I feel like I'm on fire, and the rest of the day I can just like really thrive. And so as me and my daughter up until about say 11:00, we have lunch together, and then by 11:30, we're heading off for her to preschool. And then I come home, and other than when I had the kids for virtual, I've really fallen in love with doing a mental health walk right about 12:00. I get back, and I just go around the block, and I take like a 15-minute walk, listen to a podcast sometimes it's just music, and just be with the outdoors and be with my own thoughts. I was really enjoying it before winter set in, going and finding like a long pathway in the city that I live in, and just enjoying nature and just kind of getting outside my head. Like I needed to do that. That was a huge thing that I felt like I really lost when all the kids were with me during our lockdown between Thanksgiving and Christmas. But that mental health break right in the middle of the day allows me to just get outside myself and just kind of be off. And that's been a huge component for being a stay-at-home dad. You need to be able to turn that off and just be off. And so then once that is over, then I'm pretty much in this like work mode between like 12:30 and 2:30 that I have. And sometimes it's podcast interviews. Sometimes that's just getting work done. Sometimes that's editing my episodes. Sometimes that's processing my email, or sometimes it's pounding out that load of laundry that I didn't get done on time prior. Or on Thursdays is generally where I try to do my house cleaning. In the Marine Corps, we called it field day, and we had it on Thursdays as well. So I kind of made Thursdays my field day as well. Another day that I have focused is Mondays, 3 sheets to the wind that I call it. So that's the day that I focus on getting every bed linen in the house washed. And that's its own little chore and like micro project, trying to get all the washer and dryers timed correctly to get it switched. And so once all that is done, I go with my daughter, I come home. Usually I either try to play with her or wrap something up from work, or I switch into getting dinner ready, or maybe finish cleaning up, picking up the house a little bit. Kids are home by 4, dinner's on the table. We spend some time till like maybe 7:30. Kids are in bed. I do a little bit of work, or maybe go spend some time with my wife, and then the day repeats. And the biggest thing that I've had to kind of flex is there's nights where I'm working late and then the morning routine suffers, and I just get up with the kids essentially almost and get them, and they get ready, I get ready. And that's just how it is. And I don't always get to the gym that morning, but I've really had to just kind of work through that. There's a lot of emotions that go into trying to balance that. Like sometimes I felt like I was burning the nighttime oil and it was just like robbing the morning time. And the other, like there's a huge component through all of this that most men probably aren't even realizing, but I was in the pit of it for almost all of last year. Since I was 18 and I joined the Marine Corps, I've had some place to be every single morning. That wasn't my own will. Like I had to be at boot camp. I had to then be in the military. I had to be down in formation to get ready for a run by 5. And then when I got out of the Marine Corps, I had to go to work. And I always had work to go to. Not having a place you're required to go to is a real mind, almost reconfiguration, because that will that you have to go is a major reason I was getting out of bed and I didn't really know it. And rewiring myself to get out of bed on my own desire. And also there's kind of like the first 5-10 minutes of every morning was like the weight of what I was entering into, like trying to build a business that can sustain my stay-at-home dad life, that all of this kind of just hit me. And it's like, you know, if you just stay in bed, you can kind of hide from the reality. Like it was like a 10-minute micro depression every morning that I had to rework through and relive and get back into my moment. And then once I got through that, I was fine. But that was something that really took me. And I honestly feel like I didn't get to the other side of that battle until just I passed my anniversary. I feel like something in my head switched. They're like, okay, it's been a year. It's the mourning phase is almost maybe the better way to say, or my grieving phase. And now it's time to step into this whole idea and let go of everything that what was from the past. That's a long answer, but that's essentially how I've had to design it to get through what I need to get through.
And I understand it because, to be honest with you, well, case in point, this, like you were able to help me out with this, and again, appreciate it so much, because you know when you have to, and that's just part of being a parent anyway, is you got to flex around things. I mean, you have things happen, right? So I'm always playing with that routine, and I have to, because the problem, well, not the problem, but the issues facing a large family are that everybody's time shifts. I want to say almost weekly. So it's hard to build up good habits, because as soon as you get in a routine, something's going to happen. Somebody's going to start getting up later or get up too early, and like mess up your whole kind of routine that you have set, your habits. So I've learned to move things around sometimes for the sake of A, variety, and B, necessity, like in orders of importance. You know, you get up early, but then maybe you're not feeling good, so you go back down. But then like, okay, what are the vital steps? Reading, a little journaling, this, that, the other things to get your mind calm, so that when you're going into the day doesn't take you. You seize the day, don't let the day seize you. But that's the constant battle. And I always wonder, like these guys that were never in any kind of military organization or paramilitary organization, when COVID hit, how did they like do it? Because they didn't have even the most basic discipline, self-discipline, to push through all this and be productive. And
I would go a little bit further and say it's not so much the routine that was stripped away, it's their ability to hide. Because most men can hide behind their work, and I got to go to work. Someone said I got to be there for a meeting. And whether it's true or not, no one's going to really call you out on it. And that all evaporated when you had to face the music of what you created, whether it be a hostile family environment or whether one is peaceful. You didn't get to go to work and hide and pretend that what you came home to every day didn't exist. And to me, that's the reality that I think a lot of men had to face, that like when you're home, you realize everything that was going on, especially if your wife's maybe been taking care of the kids. Like there's monumental mindsets that I now empathize with a stay-at-home mom that most men don't even begin to understand. Like one of the first things I realized, my wife went to China for 10 days in 2019, which really planted this seed to be a stay-at-home dad. Like I loved being a dad. I took vacation for those 10 days and we were just in dad mode. I didn't have to do anything with work. I just fell in love with it. But the first thing I learned in that moment, it's the amount of decisions you have to make in a single day. That was so exhausting. I felt like I woke up with a hangover every day and I wasn't even drinking. Like it was just a mental exhaustion. And like, do I switch the laundry now? When is the laundry ready? All these things in your head you're keeping running. What discipline did I just issue to my kid? Because like 20 minutes later, I've already forgotten it. And I'm like, frick, I need to keep that going. And it's the decisions is the very first thing that you're trying to keep all these balls in the air, and that stay-at-home moms really just do it beautifully and like just do it naturally. And for me, it was something I didn't have any real understanding of doing. And you talk about routine. I have fallen in love with my routine probably 4 times in the last year. Like, man, I'm like, this is it. Like, and the crazy part is the week before the lockdown started, every week was kind of chaos leading up to that. Since I lost my job in February or Valentine's and the end of March, every week was kind of like, it was just a hot mess of my daughter was in daycare at the point. Sometimes she wasn't in preschool, but daycare. And it was just going back and forth, trying to balance everything. And the week before lockdown, I had nailed it. It was the perfect week. I felt I could do this. And then boom, lockdown happened. I'm like, well, that's gone. And so then I had to rewire everything again. And even when the fall happened, my kids have been in person school all year long. And I was like, I've loved this routine. I got my mental health walks. I get my work done. My daughter's in school. This is just perfect. I get one-on-one time. And then boom, they come home and they go virtual for 2 months. And I'm like, now I'm a teacher, entrepreneur, housekeeper, all of these things, trying to keep it alive. And I was just mourning my own routine again. I'm like, man, I just wanted to go back to that routine that I had because I loved it so much. And I think there's just something to men that we want the idea of there's a pattern we can follow. But what you realize when you step into the world of a dadpreneur, you have to really almost go with the flow, bend like a willow tree, and be less rigid and more flexible to the world and the circumstances around you every day. And don't always fall in love with it, because otherwise, like myself, you're going to be mourning it because something's going to smack you in the face. And you're like, well, I didn't see that coming. And they're like, what happened?
I find that the hardest decisions are the ones that are supposed to be made mutually, because the way you would do it was not the way they would do it. Like the way you wash clothes or the way you do a simple chore. So that's usually the point of friction, because, you know, as men, we're like, what are you talking about? It looks great, but not to them. And then, you know, just the friction that might come from that, because you're doing quote unquote their job, but they're not respecting like the fact that you are the man and this is how you do things, right? So because you're in their domain now, so almost like you got a second boss. But I mean, these are the things we got to deal with. So I wanted to ask a question: does entrepreneurship run in your family? Like, was your father or anybody in your family an entrepreneur at any point, or is this kind of just new to everybody and you just had to kind of...
There's no entrepreneurship on my wife's side. Her parents are both in the Air Force. My dad was a farmer, so I would call it entrepreneurship, but it's almost its own category out of entrepreneurship. I don't think most farmers would call them entrepreneurs unless they're like running a farm as a corporation. They don't have to do a lot of the work. But my dad, we ran a 150 head cattle farm growing up, and so it was more about like, you can be your own man kind of idea, and you can make your own time and not have to be accountable to someone. So that was part of my life. And I liked the idea, but when I got to the Marine Corps, they tell you that you need to get a job and you need to get your degree. And within that process, like, it's just this default code they issue to you. That code ran for like 10 years and I got lost in it. So like, if I could do it all over again, I would have like slowed down. I would have spent probably a year just hanging out with my dad on the farm, figuring out what I wanted to do, getting a nice view of where I wanted to go. I mean, I was only unemployed for 2 weeks before I had a job. So I didn't spend any time slowing down. And less than a year later, I was already meeting my wife. Everything was just moving so fast. And if I wish I could have gone back and just kind of enjoyed the view from where my dad's life was without this idea of running towards something. But again, it's part of the military and we just need to be going and doing. And I felt like I needed to be doing. I mean, I was a lot less self-aware back then. I mean, I have like light years of self-awareness more now. And I was just running towards this feeling that I had no idea I was even running towards it. And I wish I would have slowed down. But farming was that kind of that seed that has now grown into, I like the idea of making my own time and making my own choice and being able to run my own life.
Got it. So it was planted in you. You just didn't get to grow until.
Yeah, and my dad was one of action, not always words. So he always had to maybe like let life always unfold. But then you're like, oh, that's what dad was trying to do when he was doing that. And like he was a great networker, and he's known throughout the county of who he is. His name is well recognized. I never knew the value of being known, the value of communicating, the value of talking. Like he never sat down and said, Ben, you really need to have more people in your life. I never said that. But now looking back, as I've learned to network, I'm like, that's what he was doing. That's like, and I didn't know that. I had to learn it through a delayed process of reflection.
He was farming people. You just didn't see it.
Exactly. And as a kid, I was just annoyed. I'm like, Dad, we've been here for an hour. Can't we just go? So like, that's my core memory of that, of like riding with him somewhere and be like, Dad, you've been talking to this guy forever. Let's just go.
Yeah. But that dude probably like made a lot. If you ever dug into it, your dad probably be like, yeah, man, that guy's my best customer. So I'm definitely going to be talking to him more. You know what I mean? So, all right. So I'm going to break this up with 5 questions that are random. And I want to see what you come up with. Ready?
Yep.
So if you could talk in your sleep, what would you say?
Stop thinking. I'm an overthinker. And even as I go to bed, I'm overthinking. And it's the downside of working at night because my mind's often active. So I usually either like try to read a fiction book to slow it down. But if I'm talking in my sleep, I'd be like, just be quiet. Just enjoy the silence of your brain just recharging, because I am going a mile a minute. My brain and thoughts are going a mile a minute. I'm all like, if you give me a problem, my brain can't help but thinking about it. And I'll have random ideas and solutions for people all the time during the day. From like a week ago, someone gave me a problem. And I'm like, hey, I thought about this idea a month later, and here's an idea for you to go chase down. Like it just is always on. So I want quiet.
Got it. What is the first thing you do when you get up in the morning?
First thing I do when I get up in the morning is I brush my teeth and take a shower, or I put my gym clothes on and go to the gym.
You don't open your eyes first?
I do open my eyes. Sometimes they're maybe a little bit crusty. Sometimes I'm not ready to look at the alarm clock yet too.
Let me brush my teeth. Practice that. What's your favorite movie quote?
Favorite movie quote? It actually, I wouldn't know if I would have said this even just a couple weeks ago, but I was in a group of mastermind men that I lead, and we actually decided to call ourselves A Few Good Men. It was the call team name we picked. And essentially I would say, I would go to the Few Good Men quote of, you want the truth? You want the truth? Can you handle the truth? Like, the truth is something that I've really learned that most men aren't able to handle the truth, but the truth is what's going to allow them to see their life in a different lens. And so for me, though, that truth moment in that movie, when he's drilling into that kernel, like that moment is the moment that most men need to go through, but are still too afraid to reveal whatever that truth might be. Because the truth, there's a lot of truth that men believe about their life every single day. And this truth has to be true for them in order for their world to make sense. And a lot of those truths aren't really true. And the moment they admit that or say it out loud or hear someone else say it, like that allows them to start questioning other areas of their life. So that would be my area.
So I don't know if you knew this or not, or if people have caught it yet, but every time I do one of these episodes, I try to find a movie title and change it to a dad thing. And you just gave me yours. I'm going to change yours to A Few Good Dads. Perfect. Yeah. So no, like, thank you for that. I'm glad I asked that question because I wanted to relate it to you somehow, and that was perfect. So, and
it's a movie about Marines, so it also ties in. I remember watching that movie in boot camp when they were trying to teach it. They always showed us like a 10-minute clip of a movie before they taught us a lesson, and that they taught us that lesson before they were talking about the USCMJ, if I believe correctly.
You got a favorite joke?
My favorite kid joke that I often go to is
Don't give us the dad joke. That's the end.
it's not necessarily a dad joke,
All right.
but there's a joke that it's from the movie Home, and it's with the boob in it. And there's a moment when they're flying in the car, and they always do the knock knock jokes, or there is a knock knock joke, and it's knock knock, who's there? Interrupting cow who? And she says moo right in the middle of that to be the interrupting cow. So it's a funny joke. It's not necessarily a dad joke. It can be, but that's kind of like my go-to one that I always go to.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm not gonna lie. I know exactly which one you're talking about.
We watched that movie. I have it almost memorized. Probably I've watched it so many times with the kids.
That's me and Frozen, pretty much. But yeah, what would you do on Mars for fun?
What would I do on Mars for fun? I think I would spend time looking up. There's been something that I don't get to do it as much as I would say I would want to, but I've had a few times in 2020 where I was in a moment or a place, one of them up in northern Wisconsin, where like the sky is clear. I've never seen so many stars in the sky. And to me, the easiest way to separate yourself from the anxiety, the emotional weight of everything you're on is when you look up and you realize that you're a speck of dust floating in the middle of a solar system that's literally floating in the middle of this spiral galaxy, in the middle of this giant ball of nothing called the universe. And you realize how insignificant the stuff that you're feeling is really in the context of the whole universe. And when I look up there, I'm reminded that life is infinite, that life is abundant. And despite what I'm feeling, life is still happening all around me when I look up. And I'd be curious what it looks like on Mars.
Yeah, I mean, if you see different, obviously you're going to see the constellations differently, and Earth is definitely going to look like maybe like a blue twinkling star instead of like Mars looks like a red one. All, good, decent question to dig into. All right, so what's one weird or funny or amazing thing that most people don't know about you?
One weird or funny thing.
Could be amazing too. Don't discount that.
It could go both ways, but I'll go with this one because it's I'm more of an oxymoron in this case. So I went to a dad conference in 2017 with a bunch of dads that I had been doing life with on the internet in a Facebook group. I've never met any of them in person. And so I had this idea. This was the first really time like the online version was showing up in person anywhere, really, other than work. And I was like, are they going to like me? Is this going to be who I am? Like, what is going to happen in here that I'm just scared to death of, like, are they going to like who I am in person? And I've never been a hugger my entire life. It's just not something I've never against it. I'm just not a default hugger. And so I go into this conference hugging or handshaking people. And that's what I thought was default. And then I quickly got upgraded to hugs. I'm like, okay, I kind of expected it, but I wasn't going to be the first guy to start hugging. And this weird thing happened. By the end of this 2-day conference, I was labeled as the guy that gave the best hugs. And now I kind of almost embrace it that I'm a Marine. I give good hugs. I cry at happy endings. I talk about my emotions regularly. And I'm this kind of like giant walking oxymoron of a United States Marine, because none of those things usually go with the standard stereotype, but it's who I am and it's who I've stepped into. And the lesson I learned in that moment where I was labeled as a guy that gave good hugs and is that other men can be the mirror for the best parts of you that you can't see. And I've used that tool in so many other ways that have illuminated different things. The professional speaking was illuminated in the same way. Like people kept saying, like, Ben, the way you put words together really just kind of connects these emotions in my heart that I never really thought were connected. And I've just started following that. And next thing you know, I have a podcast and professional speaking career. And so that little moment is one where I got validated something very odd, but now I disappoint people if they know I give good hugs and I don't give them a good one. So now it's a thing.
So you need to get yourself an Olaf t-shirt and represent.
I do think about that. I've also thought about like how is this rumor going to turn into with COVID, because most people won't like hugs, or I don't necessarily want to default to a hug in a world of COVID either. So it's interesting.
Sounds like some prank videos coming. What's this one I think about sometimes. I just like the answers, and I think they just get people thinking. What's one question that you wish people would ask you, but they never do?
This is a good question. I've used it before on other people. No one's ever asked it to me. I tell the story, but most people don't often go there. That for me, the question I wish more people would ask me and I'd have an opportunity to tell is the moment that everything changed for me, where there was like this before and after moment where there was this other Ben Killoy and now there's this new one that started doing different things. And it was born out of a question that someone gave me that if you want a result in your life you never had, you need to do something you've never done. And I was like, okay, that's an interesting question. Never heard of that. I'm like, okay, what result have I never had that I wish I really did? And I'm like, okay, I've never really had friends. I've had maybe one or two core friends. After high school, I just felt left off from all the people I went to high school with, and I had pretty much nobody. I had maybe one or two. And I was like, I've just always wanted to be connected with other people, and I've never really successfully done it. And I was like, well, what I've never done to actually make that happen? And I was like, well, you don't talk to people. And I was like, well, why don't I talk to people? And I was like, because every person you walk up to feels like that high school girl that said no, and you're programmed to avoid that rejection. It was like, because it sucked back then. Why would you do it again? Like, that makes sense. Well, okay, if I want this feeling, I need to do it. So then I found Dads at the Park. And Dads at the Park was where my life really started to change, because I always went to the park with other dads, or they were there. And I was like, God, it would be so cool to say hello to them and have a conversation. And I always tell myself, they had a long day just like I did. They probably just want to play with their kids. They don't want to talk with another dad. And then one day after having this question, I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to say hello. And then I started doing it. And it was like, wow, he wanted to talk just as much as I did. We were both just playing chicken. And so then I started doing it more. And then the third dad I ran into was a veteran. And I'm still friends with him today. And I was like, how cool is that? I just met another veteran randomly at the park. And so then that just morphed into more talking to more people. And that moment really allowed the better self to me to come to the surface, because they kept bringing to different things to me of who I was and reflecting back, and allowed me to step into it and acknowledge it even more. And now my mindset is I'm always one conversation away from changing my life, and I'll always try to say hello if I can.
That's good. If you had to say, if you had a superpower, what would that be? Like, what's your superpower? I asked this of a lot of people, because like, what are you better at than anybody else you know?
Kind of goes into how my high school experience. So in middle school, I was bullied. I always kind of pushed down, never felt I fit in. I was always trying to fit in, and then I would lose a bit of part of myself every single time. And what I learned by being pushed down is that was preparing me for later in life to pull people up. And because I've been down there in that pit where I was, I feel like I stepped more into the emotional side of myself. And I now consider myself more of an empath, that I can feel what other people are feeling before they're even sometimes able to acknowledge it. And so I feel like my superpower is being able to feel what other people are feeling with empathy and understanding, but then also gift them a perspective that allows them to see that emotion in a new way.
So with that empathy and would you say emotional intelligence?
Yes. It's a downside as well, because I often don't take action sometimes because of a feeling. And so I've had to kind of relearn how to, or get used to the idea of taking action despite the emotion that I'm feeling. But like with my kids and my daughter, like both my girls are really, even my son, he's really emotional as well. And being able to navigate these kind of storms of emotion that they're having with bringing a calm version of myself to that in itself has allowed me to like understand what they're feeling, help them and navigate it, help them kind of coach them through it a little bit and reframe it, and just give them better ideas to try next time. So I feel like that idea of understanding their emotions has created, I mean, like, the kids are young still, so I have no idea where they're going. It's still in the R&D lab, but I feel like teaching them to be in touch, label them, or a lot of times just letting it flow through. I really try to make sure emotions don't become sticky. And if they're feeling a certain way, I try not to say it's good or bad. I just try to let it flow through them. And that's really had a good effect with my son. Like, he's down to like 10 seconds almost of him crying and losing it. And then it's gone and he's right back to normal. And that emotional side has come from that superpower, I feel.
I think it's underrated. I've seen people on the opposite side of the spectrum with zero emotional intelligence, and it always irks me, because either the same people that will tell you, oh, it's business, not personal, right? And anytime I hear that, I know that that's not going to work. Because if you're so used to saying that, then you're not somebody I want to deal with. But again, that's the empath and emotional intelligence side of me. And that's something I think they miss. But, I guess they're successful in their own right sometimes. But as soon as I hear something like that, I already know, like, they're not. if they are emotionally intelligent, it's they're using it for evil. If they're saying something like to me.
And I'm a big Star Trek fan. So when I first I'd heard the word empathy forever, or not forever, but for a long time. And then when someone said that the word empath, and I was like, oh, I'm like Counselor Troy from Star Trek, The Next Generation. I was like, that makes perfect sense. She can feel what other people are feeling. She can sense their mood. And like, that's a lot of who I am. And it was also early on, like a real problem because I would feel all these feelings from everybody else. And then I would just be like a sponge and soak them up. And I would just feel like Oreos was the only solution in that moment. I'm like, what do I do with all these feelings I absorb? Like, what do I do now? And it's taking be calm myself and for me not to make them sticky, because once they're in there, then they were sticking to my own BS. So once I work through my own BS, now it all kind of just flows through, and I can be on a coaching call with a dad and he drops something really heavy. And early on, that would have destroyed me because I would have just felt so sad that I wouldn't overcome the sadness. And now it just kind of flows through. I go back out and play with my daughter. It's not as sticky anymore. It just flows through me anymore.
And I find a lot of those times they just needed to get it off their chest. And once they did, like, like peeling, ripping off the Band-Aid or something, they feel better right after it. So feeling sad for them, unless they ask for it, doesn't really do them any good. But it's nice to acknowledge it and let them get it off their chest. I see that a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the opposite side of the spectrum, so if your dad's superpower is empathy and emotional intelligence, then what would be your kryptonite? What's the thing that you struggle with most as a dad?
I've made light years process on this. I did 75 hard during quarantine, and that really helped unlock a lot of the BS that was inside my head. And it all goes back to self-love. So when I looked in the mirror, I did not look like who I was on the outside. And no matter how much inner work I did on the outside, there was still this poor, weak boy that still got punched in high school. And I really had to change both of those images. I had to change and start loving the person in the mirror just as much as the person I loved on the inside. Because as long as I saw this weak person on the outside, I was always taking the position of weakness when I took action. And even when I showed up, my energy, my excitement, my ability to feel like that I can help you to get through what you're going through was even weaker because I saw myself as weak. And now I never had a beard at any time in my life. This is the first year I've had a beard. And throughout this last year, my frame of mind has been changing. Like if I'm on a Zoom call or something, like in the early days, I'd notice like, man, this guy looks like a badass looking back. I'm like, oh wait, it's me. That's never how I always felt. Anything, I was always like, oh man, I look fat today. I hope no one notices. Like that was the thought in my head. So it's kind of like that self-image. And the part that I tell men a lot within this mode, if you struggle with self-image, or if you're on the inside, maybe you go to the gym and you look perfect on the outside and you're really an empty shell on the inside. This idea of loving who you are on the inside and the outside is key component to increasing love in your life, because you really can't unconditionally love others in your life until you can unconditionally love yourself. And you have to go on that hard journey to love the outside and the inside. And when you do that, you realize that you can actually begin to meet your own needs for what you need in your own life. And then everything else in your life is just extra and bonus. And that brings it from a more abundant, and you don't need contracts or covert contracts with different people to get your human needs met, or you're not vicariously living through your kids. Or if your kids hate you today, you don't feel miserable because your kids' hatred of you that day doesn't dictate how much you like yourself. Like that was a huge, and it's still a kryptonite for me. Like I'm still on this journey, but last year really stepped it up for me, and I made more progress last year than I did in the last 5 years. I wish I would have started on the outside versus the inside, and I probably would have been 5 years ahead of where I am today even.
So when you feel that creeping up again, because it will, it comes back, how do you, what's your quick, how do you handle it real quick? Like you see it, I'm feeling that way again. Like what's your go-to move to bring
in the summer? I feel like I nailed it. In the winter, I don't feel like I have it as nailed down. It's more just kind of work through it. But in the summer, I was telling a friend on a call that I was on that one day I'm going to go on a run with my shirt off. I've always been jealous of other men running down the sidewalk with their shirt off. And I'm like, someday that's going to be me. And I'm going to love not having to worry about it. And they're like, why don't you fucking do it now? And I'm like, well, I don't feel ready. And they're like, bullshit, fucking do it. And so I was like, oh, that fucking sounds scary. So I did it. And I would say there's still a lot that's not perfect underneath this shirt, but I did it and I went running. And what I realized that when there was nothing but boxers and a pair of running shorts between me and the world, that there was no masks, There was really nothing hiding who I was. It was all out there. The wind was ripping by me. Like I felt all the bullshit stories in my head just rushing away as the wind was running by me. And honestly, I can't remember the last time I felt that free, because there was no anything. There was nothing. There was no tools that I had on me to hide who I was. I was everything I was in that purest form. And running really was something that just kind of helps you feel, change your emotions and everything. And I really, really fell in love with it. And I've lost track of it. I had virtual not happened, I probably would have tried to be a runner in the winter, but there is just something unnatural about trying to convince yourself to go running in 15-degree weather. But before winter's over, I feel like I'm going to work my way back into that. But for right now, I just stick with the gym, and that's kind of like my reboot. And if I can anchor strong in the gym in the morning, know I did my little bit to improve for tomorrow, that usually gives me the anchor point to get through the day.
I feel you, but don't let David Goggins hear you say it. He will come on this podcast. He'll break in somehow and cuss us both out. But every time I hear his name, my feet hurt and I get cold. Yes. So yeah. You did mention masterminds. So are you still in them? How have they helped you? Because I have my opinions about them, and I operate one, and then I'm in a couple. I value them, but me telling it. So what? How do you feel about them? What do they do for you?
So there was a second moment where everything started to change, where it's kind of weird how the serendipity of the universe worked. I had been listening to EO Fire, which probably was like the third podcast I ever listened to ever, Entrepreneur on Fire with John Lee Dumas. And I really loved it. I was like, oh my God, this guy is so crazy and awesome with all these cool stories and ideas. And then one of those stories was Larry Hagner from the Good Dad Project. And I was like, who the hell is this guy? It sounds like my big brother that I've never had. And I had two sisters, so I never had a brother. I was like, man, this guy sounds awesome. So then I check him out, listen to the podcast. I'm like, who is this guy? He sounds amazing. I joined his Facebook group. I start helping guys in there with advice, where I get help when I needed it. And then he reached out of the cloud one day and came into my messenger. He's like, hey, you want to jump on a phone call? And I'm like, the voice in the radio wants to have a phone call with me. What is going on here? And so I jumped in with a call at him. He invited me to a mastermind, which was very early on in his process of growing what he has today. And that mastermind really taught me being vulnerable, letting it all out and laying it down, and what that can do, and just get perspective. And being connected with other men was a feeling I never had before in that way. And that grown now. I'm still part of the alliance. I've been in it for almost 5 years now. I help him lead his call teams within that group. And there are masterminds that don't serve with a heart-centered approach of like the people matter within it more than the opportunities that you have to grow your business. And Larry is nothing like that. So that's what's always made his work really well. And other ones you might join that they get so caught up in that it like the funnels or all these different things that you just feel like you're part of a cog in a wheel, and that's not going to allow you to change your life. The ones that I usually always go into is where there's a core group of men that aren't crazy. We all have the same kind of ideas, and we all kind of want to improve ourselves. To me, those are the best places for me to connect. And another one that I connect with is Nick Maypash, his Evolved Man Cave Mastermind, which is kind of a way I go in there to be served by a different community, which is also good. Like if you're part of a community or leading a community, it's also good to have another community where you can go and lay down your armor and be helped in a way that's not necessarily vulnerable into the whole world kind of way as well. But the part that why they're so important that I've learned through my podcast, Military Veteran Dad, is that for millennia, men survived in tribes. We had someone ahead of us. We had someone behind us. We never had to know it all. We were always either helping or being helped in a tribe for almost all of the men's existence. And in the last 150 years, since the Industrial Revolution, since men started going to work, we have been slowly and more getting closer to this idea that men are meant to do life alone. And men were never wired to do life alone. It's a guaranteed certainty life will give you more than you can handle, that your shoulders are not strong enough to carry everything that life will give you, which is why you need a tribe of men to share the load when it does get heavy. You need that to relieve the burden. Like, I need help. I need 3 other men to help me lift this heavy burden that I'm having in my chest because I can't do it alone. And it's that life of quiet desperation that convinces men that my life would be better and my family would be better if I wasn't here, and they take their own life because they can't bear the weight of what they're carrying anymore. And men were never wired to do life alone. Like, to me, that's a fundamental piece of our society. It's part of fatherhood. It's wired into all the fabrics. In many of the cases, the problems we have today, like I've heard it said by Dr. Meg Meeker, you want to fix America, put a dad in every street corner, and you'll begin to start fixing the problems that we have in America, because men are craving to be led. And if we don't find someone, we'll find some of the worser angels on your shoulder to go towards. And gangs often provide leadership, which is what men need. And if your father's not there, they're going to find it. And being a dad, you're not going to have all the answers either as a dad. So you need other men that are 10 years ahead of you, that have already walked the road that you've been on. And you can shortcut the learning when you have that process, and you don't have to figure it out all alone. Like, it's a masterful tool that most of society has no idea how to really even execute, or that it even exists. I feel like it's a dormant idea within the society we have today.
So who have you met, let's say, like in all the masterminds you've gone throughout the years, who would you say, like, if you had to choose one person that had the most impact on you, or was your favorite person to connect with, and like, that you're like grateful, if nothing else, that you met that one person, and what were they like?
I would say it would be Larry Hagner, just because he has been like a big brother. He's been a part of my life for 5 years. He's opened doors. He helped me step into my own podcast because he's had one. So him having one, following his shadows, kind of gave me the confidence to step into my own. He's given the opportunity for me to just realize more of who I am and lead other men. And to me, that relationship with him has been transformative in a way that I am who I am today, because I stood on the shoulders of other giants, and Larry Hagner was a really big person within that role that I played. So
you briefly mentioned it, but let's talk about your podcast and the whole cause, not the Military Veteran Dads podcast. So talk to us about that, how that's evolved. And, if you have, I imagine that's kind of how you want to leave your mark on the world, is just being the guy to guide guys through this problem. But take us through that, like, for somebody who's not a military veteran, like, how do you serve these guys? Like, how do you help them?
So I'll go to the moment where, like, right before having that friend moment, my midlife crisis was when I turned 30. So when I turned 30, I had this big, like, realization that I think I'm going to die, and there's not going to be a single person that gave a shit that I was here. And there was not going to be anybody to show up at my funeral and be like, man, Ben, I'm so glad that he was in my life. He really made it better. And I was like, it was a really sad place to be. So for me, from that moment to where I am today, like, it began because I started asking better questions and through that pit of loneliness. And I went to a conference in 2018. And in this conference, a military conference, and I was talking to a military spouse about my story of coming home as a dad. And she started crying from my story. And I was like, whoa, because her husband came home from war, but didn't mentally come home from war. He's just on autopilot. And in that moment, I was like, my voice, my story did that. And I think I should do something with it. And so 3 months later, I launched Military Veteran Dad. I really didn't have any idea what the bigger idea was. It just felt right. It aligned. It was just smack right in my gut. And I was like, this is it. This is my next mission. And on the plane ride home, I created the idea to let the mission of the podcast be to bring every dad home, and not just home physically, but emotionally to their families. And it just kind of started. And I started kind of figuring out what the niche was and having conversations. But what at the core of the podcast is helping military men identify the pathway to their best life, because there is so much within the military mindset that, one, you often don't even feel like you can have emotions, because the military issues you everything you can have. So if you should be able to have emotions, they would have issued you to them, but that's not how they talk about it. And that's not how they deal with it. They just kind of avoid them. And so you have all these feelings inside that you can't even really acknowledge. Maybe you went to war. Maybe you didn't. I didn't even go to war. I was in Okinawa the entire time. But I still had these ideas of feelings are just kind of meant to be suppressed. And then you go home to your family, and then you realize, man, there's like, this place is like a untethered ball of emotions. My kids are bouncing off the house. They're crying up and down. And then I get insecure on the inside. I'm like, I need to back up, like, time out. I can't handle this, because my own emotions are on the fritz right now, and your emotions on the fritz. And it feels way overwhelming. I am like off the rails. And it's those micro moments that many military dads pull back from their family. They either end in divorce, they end in just being a workaholics, or they end up being just doing 20 years in the military and never really being connected to their families, because they hid in the military service. And most dads don't get called out for hiding in military service, because it sounds noble, and it is, But if you're doing it as a way to avoid engaging and being the best father you can be, then it's not the right way to do that. And the podcast is focused on that mission to help dads come home to their best life, to be the best dad they can be, because there are dads that didn't come home and never get to hug their kids again, and their kids never get to hug their dad again. And we did. And to me, every time a dad doesn't come home to their family, we're not living up to the gift that those dads that didn't come home gave us, to come home and hug our kids every night. And military dads veterans itself are part of the 7% of the population. And I'm a big believer that if these dads come home to their families and ignite the passion within their kids and help them become better adults, that we can create a generation that is extremely unique and ready for the next world, because only 7% of the population has seen the world like a veteran has. And that can create a better adult. So I spent a lot of time in the podcast talking about emotions, talking about strategies, talking about coming home from deployments, talking about better marriages, talking about better parenting tips. All of those things are talked about, and we deal with it. And the whole objective is to get you to come home, realize your best life is waiting for you right there within your family. And your legacy of your life isn't from your service. Your legacy of your life is the family that's left behind when your time on earth is done. And you have a chance to not just impact your kid's life, but you can create real generational change with your family if you show up and connect with your family.
So you don't just talk on a podcast about these issues. You actually provide, well, you connect them or you counsel them somehow, and that's your consultation service, correct?
Yeah, sometimes the podcast interviews turn into a little bit of a coaching session. Maybe it's something that I recognize and like, hey, here's a different way. And oftentimes, I mean, I've had Navy SEALs start crying in the podcast from something I said that like, whoa, he got really hit with a heavy moment. So there's lots of random moments, but it's those consultations that you're referencing, those discovery calls, where it's essentially when this dad is on autopilot with this programming that I just need to be a provider. Like that's usually the biggest warning sign. If you feel like your only role is to be a provider, or another way that I just had an email from a dad the other day, like I just feel untethered. I feel like my life is unraveling. Feel like I have no control and everything is flying off the wheels at the same time. Those are the dads that I love talking with, because they're only a few little micro moments or perspectives away from getting regrounded, realizing what the right next step is, to quote Frozen, and get them a path to that better life. And it's what I've called It's Time to Come Home coaching. It's an 8-week program that going through this program helps you understand where you are in life, how you got to where you are, where you can go with your family, like crafting a legacy, and then just giving you these mindset shifts to help come home and be a better dad and be a better resource for the family. Because you didn't start a family just to provide money. You started a family for a reason that's bigger than yourself. And oftentimes we forget that.
So who's the best person that could benefit the most from a consultation call with you, if you had to narrow it down? Like, is it, you tell me, because you know who best benefits from it.
The program that I've designed is, I took the lesson from the military, but what I learned in the military podcast is that sports professionals, Wall Street bankers, really anybody that's in an aid-driven, addictive work type environment can benefit from this program. So I took the program and designed it for every dad. And the best way I describe it is that if you feel successful, if you are a high achiever at work, like, man, when you go to work, you are on fire. You close the deals, you know how to show up, you know how to do what you need to do. But when you walk through that door at home, you feel like a doormat and you don't know who you are. And that feeling is super scary, and you're intimidated from walking through the door. Maybe you avoid it. Maybe you leave early to get away from that feeling at home. But the dad that feels success at work but feels like a doormat at home, that's who the best place for that is. Because that's a military dad, that's a Wall Street banker that spends too much time in Manhattan. All of these ideas where you spend more time being successful than you do in your home, those are the men that I can really help.
Got it. So we're gonna, I invite anybody watching this to connect with Ben, if that sounds like you. I mean, it sounds like this is not only military, but just high performance individuals would benefit from this as well. And there's a program behind it. Just one dad to another. I wanted to support you in that. I'm not military. I'm paramilitary, fire department retired, but I do see the value of all this. I have experienced PTSD. I do know a lot. I've experienced similar things, especially with, I guess, just being exposed to dead bodies and just emotions that have to be checked in one place and have nowhere to go but out and into the world, and sometimes go the wrong way and are definitely self-destructive and not even realize that. So I do see.
In the fire department, you've got the shifts as well, like on for 24, off, and like the burden that puts on your wife. And if you can't communicate your emotions and how you feel and setting expectations that it work for both of you, like you're just on a landmine that eventually will go off.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of what you were saying sounds familiar. Is guys just going to work to escape home, and
Like they can't wait for the next shift because they feel at peace. Like I talked to a dad that felt like he lived in Afghanistan and he was deployed to Texas. Like he felt more at home in a war zone than he did in his own home.
and exactly, those are a lot of the issues that I've seen and experienced myself. So I definitely think if somebody out there is feeling like this, maybe, you know, like I said, military, paramilitary, emergency services, stuff like that, that you probably have something in your program that can apply to them. So definitely reach out to Ben, take advantage of his consultation, and, you know, plug into his podcast and get the benefits of, you know, the camaraderie that comes from being in those situations. Because Lord knows I could have used that a couple
And there's
times.
2 episodes I drop on my podcast. Monday is an interview show, and then Friday I call Fatherhood Friday, where it's me on the microphone only, and it's a piece of wisdom, it's a story, it's a perspective. Like some of my favorite Fatherhood Fridays are every veteran has a little Elsa inside them, that we're all going through the journey of Elsa in Frozen 1 and 2. And when you've heard it tied in together in this particular way, you're like, whoa, I've never even seen that idea within this show. That seems just one that drives me nuts. But I mean, once I had this epiphany, I started crying when Elsa steps into her power in Frozen 2, because I realized what I was doing. Like me stepping into my voice is the same thing Elsa does when she steps on that star or that snowflake and realizes she's been what she's been waiting for her entire life. To me, there is so much growth and recognition of your own life and journey that is within Frozen. That was one I did way back in like March or April. I've done ones about adventure, my own life, going through the journey of the mirror. There's so many. I did ones on the Christmas Chronicles from Netflix. I did one on that because there's a huge moment of the power that the best gift you can give your kids at Christmas is the gift and belief in themselves. That if they believe what they need in life to rise from the inside, then you've given them the best gift they can go into adulthood with. And whether your time is 5, 10, 20 years, they can run on their own belief because you already gifted them the one thing they need to do anything they need to do in life.
I think Disney needs to call you up and start to figure out ways to make these Frozen movies into more manly applications, because I think you've been able to find. Tell me what you find from Barney next time you watch that.
I haven't had to watch a Barney episode like probably since I watched them as a kid. So thank God that hasn't had a rewind. I've avoided that. We're more of a Daniel Tiger family.
Yeah, got it. So we're winding down, and you know what time it is, right? You ready for your dad joke?
I am.
That? Okay, so do us the honor, Ben. Let us hear your best dad joke.
So my favorite joke, the one that kind of irritates my kids, is telling them a joke about paper. But then I always say, never mind, because it was terrible.
Okay.
Because paper is terrible.
I had to take a second, but that was definitely one of those, wait a minute, I had to walk away, come back. All right, no, but those are the ones that hit later.
I've used that in a few speeches as well. Like it kind of like gets people to like, whoa, that was because it's so simple, but it's like, never mind, I'm not gonna tell you. It's just terrible. It's a terrible joke anyhow.
That's like I have one. I say I had a joke. Now I forgot it. So there we go. I messed up. I wasn't prepared. I suck. But this was your moment anyway. I didn't have to. I do dad jokes all day. If I bomb here and there, so be it. But listen, it was great having you. Thank you for doing me the honor.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a random event for that. I didn't have anything planned tonight. So, and as a stay-at-home dad, what you don't realize is these little human connections is what you live on. When I get to talk to another adult, I remember I got to talk to a Marine in uniform a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, dude, I don't know what we're going to talk about, but you just made my day because I get to connect and reminisce with a person in uniform, and he was on Camp Pendleton. I was like, you just made my day. So these are often a gift for dadpreneurs because for me, these are where I get to just be an adult. And a lot of times I don't get to be an adult very often.
Well, if you're not on Clubhouse yet, let me know because you can have a lot of these good dad conversations on there. I'm
in Clubhouse, but I haven't had a chance to squirrel it because life has been so chaotic. I haven't had a chance to fit it in yet, but it's on the list of like, I feel like everyone's always doing like all these like networking and all these like standard entrepreneurship stuff. And I'm like, I feel like a dad would just explode in there because there's nobody really talking about dad, but everybody's always has a lot of questions.
Whole dad army going on. I will just link up with me, get in there. Got a club going. I got different clubs that there's fatherhood initiatives. Trust me when I tell you, there's dad rooms going on, dad joke rooms, and dad
Well, they
entrepreneur.
haven't popped up in my Clubhouse feed yet, so Clubhouse hadn't really figured out who I am yet, I guess.
Friendly, get it friendly in there. I got all. Trust me, I got you, brother.
All right, I'll connect with you.
So it was great having you. Thank you for saving my booty today. That's what the Marines do, and you definitely showed up for that. So appreciate you, brother. And yeah, man. Like I'm glad we met. I think we met through Facebook.
I think it was just a random Facebook group post that you did, and I was like, sure, why not? It's a conversation. Like I said, I'm always one conversation away from something magical.
Exactly, and I'm glad we got to meet on that note. So yeah, I know this is up past your bedtime. It's kind of past mine too, but hey, that's
well, I'm Central, so it's only 9:00 here, so I'm still good. That was the best part of your time zone. Like I'm behind you, so I didn't have to do the East time.
I
Try
to time it so that the kid, like dads that got kids, could get them to bed early, but I can't. I can't be in every time zone. But yeah, at least we got that out of the way, and you get to go to bed at a decent time. And what more could you ask for? A good conversation and getting to bed on time. So I mean, I delivered on that at least, right?
Yes, you did, and good conversation. And now I can go to bed knowing that I gave something back to the world tonight.
Word up. All right, so we're gonna see you off, but thank you, and hang out at the green room for a minute, and we'll talk after this. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So that was awesome, right? I hope so. What I wanted to share with you guys, as I always do, is if you don't know, we have I'm part of a mastermind. That's kind of what we were discussing in there. It's not exactly for veterans, more for entrepreneurs, but every week now we're doing an every week thing. I changed it. We're doing a little giveaway for a free hot seat, so you guys can experience a mastermind for yourself and see what that's like, and see if you can get value from it. And so I would like to invite you guys to participate in that. Here is the information for that. But we did get some people that filled in their names just before we got on the show. So I'm going to, let me see if I can do this real quick. Share. We're going to do the old spinneroonie. And sorry, I don't have it ready yet. Let me see, application window. There you go. We're going to spin the wheel. So get ready to spin the wheel. We got the names up. And let's see who wins a hot seat this week. Looks like we got Diane Bernstein. You are the winner on The Price is Right. Okay, so I'll contact you for that. And I'm just going to say that this was a great one. I love that we had that guest just now, and I just can't wait to do the next week's one because these things give me life. I don't know if you have a show out there, but if you do, and you start feeling the love and start feeling the groove of it, like you will definitely, just appreciate the fact that you're able to do this. And I'm glad and blessed that I'm able to share with other dads and other entrepreneurs and other people what's going on in my life and hear about what's going on in theirs, and hopefully we can build each other up. So that's it. Take care, comb your hair, and I'll see you on the next one. Daddy out. Take care.